Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. I've got another special episode for you today because I'm joined by one of my students from my online course, Build a Better Bass Trap. This is Richie Wynn. Thanks again for joining me.
Hi, good to be here.
How's it going today, Richie?
It's very good. It's a bit chilly, but I've put my jumper on, so that's good.
Excellent. Ready to dive into some nerdy talk with me?
Yes.
Sweet. Well, I mean, maybe let's just start with kind of what you do in the room. Like, can you tell us a bit about like the work that you do, what kind of music you work on? Like, what do you use the room for?
Well, I'm currently I'm still in the learning mixing process. I do have a friend who's currently working with me to record some worship songs, which is
Okay.
interesting. I'm not particularly into worship songs, but these things we have to do to help our friends. So other than that, just basically, I'm doing a lot of learning at the moment rather than a lot of creating. I've picked up a couple of courses from Produce Like a Pro Academy
Gotcha.
and Home Studio Corner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm enjoying the challenges that those present, which is it's really nice to have your mixes compared with other people's,
Mm-hmm.
and see how you get it on. That's really good as a sort of reference point, you know.
Yeah, totally. So
Because you
for
can
you
always
mainly.
second guessing yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
having a room that sounds good is a definite plus. Yeah,
Right? It's kind of like it's like a force multiplier, right? It's like it doesn't do anything on its own, but it just makes everything else easier.
it does, and I must admit, until I'd treated this room, I wasn't doing anything with music in particular, and so it's opened up that world for me again. It's provided a space where I can do that stuff. It's not shoved in the corner of the living room, and you think, oh, I'm not bothered with that today. I'd rather watch Columbo or something, you know?
Sure.
So it's good. It's a space you can go in there, and I just lose time in here.
Yeah.
It's like a black hole for time. It's amazing.
Yeah. Flow states. It's great, right? You enter,
Yeah,
you go into
yeah,
down the rabbit hole, and like time passes, time flies.
yeah. My neighbours were interested in what it was I was making all this racket about,
Okay.
cutting wood up and what have you. So
Uh-huh.
I invited them in to see what I'd done at the end, and everybody that has been in the room has found it bizarre. Bi
Bizarre.
Bizarre because there's no echo.
Uh-huh.
They're not used to being in a room that's like that.
Yeah.
When I'd done it, I spoke to my father on the telephone, and whilst I was speaking to him, I went into the kitchen, and he said,
Uh-huh.
"Have you moved rooms?" I said, "Yes, I've gone in the kitchen." He said,
Uh-huh.
"Wow, it sounds really echoey in there,"
Yeah.
because he got used to listening to me in my room. So it's even audible down the telephone line. That's amazing.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Great. I mean, that's a perfect segue to ask kind of what made you decide that the time had come to invest so much time to treat the room. Like, where were you at before? Kind of, can you take me back? Like, paint a picture for me where you were before. What made you decide that now is the time?
Yes, I was. I'd used this room as a sort of studio before, and
Hmm.
I'd put carpet tiles on the walls, but they were very thin carpets. I borrowed them from where I used to work because they were moving building, so these were
Okay.
like redundant tiles, and I put them all over the room, and it was awful, awful. But I did record a couple of things in there just for myself. But recently, I've had my equipment in the lounge, and like I say, not been doing much with it. But my friend Johnny got in touch and said, "Will you help me record these songs?" He plays guitar and does the singing, so I've had to do the production basically, add the arrangement, the strings, the keyboards, the bass. And one day, I was putting a bass synth onto one of his tracks,
Hmm.
and I couldn't get it to sit right. I was EQing it all over the place. And then I thought, well, it wasn't an ideal position. I knew that because I had a wall directly behind me.
Hmm.
So I was thinking, well, put some padding on the wall behind. So I tried that, and that didn't work either. And I was like, this is driving me insane. I can't work in this position because I would go up like a base staircase test, and it was ridiculous. You go da 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 da, absolutely crazy. So I thought I must do something about this. So I found some of your videos, and I looked with interest, and I found all
Hmm.
kinds of other stuff. and there was some conflicting information, and I was like, I did not know what to do. So I got a reference mic, and I
Mm-hmm.
got REW, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought I would find out how to use this stuff.
Okay.
And that showed me in a graph exactly what I've been hearing. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's the room that's the problem.
Mm.
Oh, what am I going to do now? You know? And I had this back room that was basically just full of rubbish, boxes that had arrived and old equipment and things gathering dust. So I thought, in for a pound, in for a penny, I'll clear it out and we'll start doing something. And it was only when I found your Build a Better Bass trap that I thought, actually, this needs some investment. And I need to invest in this. What is the point of investing, let's say, £1,000 in a laptop and software and more on speakers and all that stuff when the room is rubbish? There is no
Mm-hmm.
point, absolutely no point. And it often, I'd overlooked it for years, the room. And it didn't seem to be a problem. I think it was this particular key that Johnny had written this song. It was in G or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that all the keys I was playing were in G, and it was like, oh my God. And it came to light because I'd done the equalization in my position in the lounge, and I played it back through a different system, and it was just ridiculous. It was awful because I'd EQ'd the hell out of it to try and overcome room modes or whatever it was that was causing this problem. And it was just a prime example of the effect of the room being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I found out, and I thought, right, well, this will have to do. And luckily, well, luckily, I got made redundant a few years ago, so I had some money to
Okay.
be able to throw at this problem,
Okay.
and plenty of time.
Plenty of
I wasn't
time.
doing
Yeah.
anything else, and I thought, if I solve this, then I'll be happy. And
Uh-huh.
I'm absolutely overjoyed. It's brilliant.
Sweet. Well, excellent. Well, tell me, like, what is the main change for you? What has changed? What has your experience been like in the room so far?
I'm finding it a lovely room to be in. The things I've started doing, the mixing and whatnot, it just sounds great in here. I thought I'd overdone it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because when I looked how many panels it was, I looked on the porous absorbing calculator and that kind of thing, and it said you're going to need this much, and I was like, really? How am I going to fit 23 panels in that little room? Well, it turns out you can if you're
It turns
prepared
out
to
you
lose
can.
if you're prepared to lose quite a bit of space doing it. Because it's only a small room. It's 3.53 meters by 3.73 meters.
Okay.
So it's almost square. Oh, sorry, 3.26 by 3.53. So I went to finding the listening position, the base
Mm-hmm.
hunter.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
That told me where is the best place. I couldn't use the best place because it was
Damn.
right in front of the patio. Well, it's got a door on my left and a patio window on the right. So it's a throughway between the two
Mm-hmm.
doors. I've got a door in the corner, so I couldn't put any corner traps in there. I was thinking, will this ruin anything I'm planning to do?
Mm-hmm.
There were so many questions along the way that I was kind of anxious that I was doing it and it wasn't going to be right because the room seemed to be not right for the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, do I need a different room altogether? You
Mm-hmm.
know, the listening position that I set upon is on the long wall
Interesting.
rather than the short wall, but it works. And that was a big thing for me. I was thinking, well, it has to be on the short wall, surely. But
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some of your videos that said, no, it doesn't. And no, it doesn't. I can say that. No,
Sure you can.
it works perfectly well.
Yeah.
I mean, the room was awful without any stuff in it. So anything I could have done to it would have been better than it was. It probably was a bit better before I took all the carpet out and stuff than it was starting from scratch. But I knew that starting from scratch, that is a baseline. You're not second guessing what frequencies the carpet's absorbing, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you tend to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, thinking. I mean, I've got a radiator behind my desk,
Okay.
and I even got to thinking, well, is it absorbent or does it resonate at different frequencies when it's hot than it's cold?
Sure.
It's crazy stuff that you think about. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Does it matter if the blinds are closed? And it's that sort of thing.
yeah, it's all these things that you end up kind of worrying about, spending time thinking about, when it turns out you really want to kind of think about the things that actually move the needle, like the big things, right? Because those
Yes.
are the ones that make the impact. And all the
Yeah.
small stuff, sure, it may have an impact, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's negligible, right?
That's right. Yeah.
When
I mean,
yeah,
during the
please.
build, I put 4 of the boxes in, and it immediately made a difference. And
Hmm.
that goes back to you once said that these first 4 are going to make a big difference,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, exactly.
the rest is bonus. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but I mean,
Well,
the rest is obviously important. But the first ones definitely make the biggest impact. That's for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
if you're
yeah,
putting panels in an empty room, those first few panels that you put in are gonna have the biggest impact by far from a feeling perspective, right? And what the
yeah,
room kind
yeah.
of feels like.
I
Did you?
I was
Yeah,
that was really encouraging actually. That when I put those in, I thought, yes, I'm doing the right thing.
excellent. Because I was just gonna ask, did you think you were gonna get to where you are now when you started out?
No, I had plans, some kind of vision, but it changed along the way as I built the thing. It evolved. I had a plan, but I evolved around it because of things like I can't fit this panel here because I've got to put a bracket on the wall behind my monitor. So the panel can't go but all the way behind. Will it make a difference? It was all ooh. And I actually, instead of dark blue, I wanted grey. So I wanted burgundy and grey because
Mm-hmm.
it's quite dark in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't get a hold of any grey. It appeared that there'd been everybody wanted grey and there was none left. So, but other than that, I didn't envisage seeing it like this. It wasn't like this in my mind's eye. It was on the plan, but I didn't know what a box on legs in my room would look like until I built it. And then I thought, that's big. I need another 4 of these. Right. Okay.
So when you just said you put those 4 in, was that the moment where you realized, oh, well, this is going to work? Like, when was the time where you were when you realized, oh boy, this is gonna work. This is gonna go somewhere.
That was when I put the 4 in. Yeah. They
Hmm.
weren't finished. There were the outer frames and the insulation in there without any of that thin film covering. I was just keen to put some in and see what
Just
happens,
test it.
and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
great. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And so walk me through what it was like going through the course. So obviously, like, how long did it take you, for example? When did you get started? What was it like? What was challenging? What did you think ended up being much easier than you thought? Maybe can you walk me through what it was like taking the course for you and going through that?
I think I watched it. I binge watched it.
Hmm.
I binge watched the course. The most difficult thing I found was planning the cutting because British suppliers, well, the ones that are the popular suppliers of timber certainly in England, they don't cut to length for you. You have to
Hmm.
do that after it's arrived. So there was this big thing that was quite expensive, the wood, as it turns out,
Mm.
because
Yeah,
of
yeah. Nowadays.
price
Hmm.
fluctuations. But that I wasn't taking that into consideration really. I
Hmm.
was going to do the project, and I had some money, and it was going to cost what it cost. I wasn't going to go and get gold-plated wood, you know. I wasn't going to go crazy with it. Going through the course was great,
Okay.
absolutely superb. And the videos of you actually building the stuff with your team,
Hmm.
that was essential.
Sweet. Excellent. Good to
That
know.
was
Hmm.
essential. I thought actually seeing somebody build this thing, I know now what somebody else does to do this,
Hmm.
rather than saying, here is some wood, this is what it looks like when it's finished. No,
Go.
we want to see
Yeah.
how does it get to that state? That was absolutely crucial. So thank you for that.
Sure thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, and maybe take us to the next step. So, planning the positioning, basically coming up with the treatment plan. So you kind of, I guess, you went through you binge watched the videos on how to build the thing, and then it came to actually planning the positioning of all the panels.
Yes,
Can you talk to me about that? What was that like?
I found your
Absorber placement hacks for odd rooms.
that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind
Sorry,
of the second course I got available at
yeah.
the moment. Yeah.
There's a little design thing in there that says in which order should you put these in your room.
Hmm. Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Excellent.
So
Okay.
on my plan, I gave each panel a number, which also helped me because whilst I was cutting the wood and getting the fabric and all that stuff, I had a page per box.
Okay.
Because they turned out not to be all the same size because my cutting is a bit iffy. I realized I needed a page just a sheet per box to say, I need to cut the wood, I need to get the fabric, I need to put the thing in it. So there was like a little production list for each box, which had the number on from the plan. That was great because I could tick things off as I went. And the order that you put them in the room, one of the things I did was I followed that plan, but it meant that I was in and out with my table to test the listening position again a couple of times. So be prepared to be taking your equipment in and out a couple of times. Okay,
so just to mount things, or why did you have to do it so many times?
I only did it a couple of times, and it was to check that the table still fit in place with the speakers still in the listening position, with the panels behind them on the wall.
Gotcha. So kind of after you made the
positioning.
Okay, so once you put the panels in the room, you wanted to just make sure that it actually fits as planned.
Yes. Okay. And some things had to be jiggled about a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
but this is the nature of things,
Exactly. There's only so far you can go in terms of detail, and in terms of planning. Our rooms are odd, unfortunately.
Well,
and slightly, you always get slightly weird angles, or something's in the way, or there's a power socket, or like some weird thing that you didn't consider, right? And you have to kind of work around that a little bit.
Yeah. So it wasn't so much that the room was odd. It was just that it is the room that it is. So I've got, for instance, I needed more than one computer monitor screen. So I was thinking, okay, well, I could put two side by side, just about, after determining my listening position and my phantom sensor. But then when I'm sitting centrally, I'm looking at the interface between the left monitor and the right monitor screen. So I'm constantly looking at the bezel between them. That's no good.
Okay. Yeah.
No. So if I'm working on one of the screens or the other, I'm going to be facing left or right while I'm doing that. So that's no good either. So I installed one monitor above the other.
Okay.
So it is neck ache inducing if I have to look at the top monitor.
Yeah.
But that meant that I needed to put the top monitor on a bracket or a pole of some sort. So I had a pole that was long enough, but I couldn't fit the pole on the table.
Okay.
Because the underneath mechanism for screwing it together with the radiator behind the table. So the behind the desk. So there's hardly any space between the table and the top of the radiator. It's that kind of thing that you find when you're going along. You think, oh, well, that pole would have been brilliant, but I can't fit it in.
Yeah.
What else can I do, So that then meant I'd have to rearrange the front wall panels a little bit. I mean, I wanted the front wall panels to be set off from the wall. They're 100 mil deep. So I wanted them to be, 10 centimeters off the wall, basically. Give me the extra that you need. And I couldn't do that because of the listening position and where the desk is and the speakers. I'd have to move everything away from the wall and I would lose my position then. So it's all considerations. And then I thought, well, it's only the ones near the speakers that are the problem. I can't move those forward, but maybe I can move the ones further up a bit away. But then that would expose the wood sides of the ones further up and potentially, well, probably provide a reflection point. So I thought, I don't want that either. So I've put them all on the wall and it's fine.
Yeah.
I needn't have panicked about it. I bought brackets and all sorts. I don't need to use.
Yeah. Excellent. I mean, yeah, great. I think this is a great example of just some of the typical compromises we have to make in these small rooms, right? Like we have to think, we can think as much as we want about what we'd like it to be ideally, but then come kind of time of mounting the thing and figuring out how it actually all fits together you think about that ahead of time, but like once you start installing things and you realize, I'm making my life too difficult, or this doesn't actually work exactly as I kind of wanted to, and I'm just gonna have to compromise. And I think that's as you just said, it's totally fine. It's just acoustics is a lot of little steps, and if you compromise on one of those little steps, it doesn't ruin the end result. That's
right.
Not how it works. Yeah?
I mean, I hadn't really been in any. Well, I've never been in a treated home studio before, so I had no vision of what one would look like, other than maybe looking at your background there. and seeing where you've got your diagonal ones and the ceiling and the wall, and some other videos, but never actually been in one. I've been in some proper studios, shall we say,
Okay.
commercial enterprises that are there for being studios, and that's a different thing altogether. They're quite echoey. Apart from the control room, the rooms are lively rooms, which is good for that kind of thing. So there was then a question for me about, will I make it too dead to recording? Having said that, before I did this build, I tried some other stuff. Well, I wanted to build at least a sound booth type thing so I could record my vocalist, because when I trained myself to hear with critical listening, well, I hadn't trained myself, but I listened more critically to what I'd recorded, and you could hear the room in there in the recordings. So I thought, what can I do? So I bought a gazebo, a pop-up gazebo, and I took some of the links out of it so that it would fit in the room without being too big, because it was like 3 meters squared, this thing. It was crazy. Considering it's going in my lounge, I wanted to be able to take it in and out. And I bought 5 duvets, and I put those over the top. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was great.
Killed all that echo, I assume, yeah?
Yeah, but the recording and the mixing position was still in the same room. So it didn't solve that problem. It was a bit of a fudge for doing recordings, but no good for afterwards,
So have you recorded in this room already now? Have you done some
Yes.
vocal recordings in here?
Yeah.
So how did they turn out?
I think I need to move the mic position in the room. At the moment, the mic position is it's in between the door and the patio window, and it's in line with those. And it did sound a bit boomy on the recording. Maybe it's the microphone. I didn't particularly do much setup of the gear. It was a kind of, while you're here, why don't you just record it? It was just a guide vocal, so that was okay. But I would spend some more time actually moving the microphone in the room. There's not a lot of space when you get 2 people in and a couple of guitars and a load of stands. But if it came to it, I could do the recording back in the gazebo in the front room, in the lounge.
Also an option. Yeah.
Because as part of this, I installed a Towman cat snake. I don't know if you're familiar with these things.
Well, basically just a load of cables in one kind of one bundle.
It's a multi-core thing, really, down an Ethernet cable. The house is a bungalow, so it's quite easy to get into the loft space to run wires. I already had an Ethernet cable in here, but it was an old one. It wasn't capable of anything quick. So I'm really glad I did that. Actually, the one that they sent me wasn't working properly, so I managed to get that replaced. That was cool. Hats off to Towman. Not that I'm sponsored by them or anything else. Other providers are available.
They're a good shop here in Europe for sure.
So what that also means now is that I can leave my my DAW, which is Logic, by the way. I can leave that in the recording, in the mixing room in the studio, and pipe the audio from that into the lounge. Now in the lounge, I've got the speakers from my consumer hi-fi linked to my TV, but there's a distribution thing that goes around the house. So I've got speakers in the kitchen and in the bathroom. So
nice.
when I've recorded something, I've got 4 different spaces I can go and listen to it in.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you think that's a good idea, but you always you go there, the bass doesn't sound particularly good in here. So you're tempted to go and tweak it, forever tweaking these things. And you have to get out of the habit of that and say, well, what does other stuff sound like in this room?
That's exactly right. I was just going to say, I mean, referencing really becomes critical.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Tell me about what it was like once the panels were all in place, and you first set up the speakers and you had your first listen. Do you remember that moment? What was that like?
It was a bit odd.
Okay, how?
Well, I wasn't used to that sound. Well, the speakers sounded quite weak, actually.
Interesting.
Didn't seem to have a lot of bass to them. But I'd only previously been listening to them in a room that was potentially highlighting the bass in places where it shouldn't have been. So it was a whole sort of get used to this room scenario. And now that I am getting used to, or I am used to the room, there's enough. There's no problem with that. It's just a case of these speakers in this room with this treatment. It's a different thing from these speakers in a different room with no treatment. It's totally different. So
And I think
you
it's
may
great.
find that it sounds a bit odd. And one of the things I thought I might have got wrong was the phantom center.
Okay, how?
Well, because my speakers now they're pointing behind me
Mm-hmm.
to quite a large degree, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's not equilateral triangle by any means.
No. Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, is this right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's telling me it has to be equilateral, and it's not. And I'm thinking, well, it sounds right to me, so it must be right. But when I found that phantom center, I heard people describing what it felt like to hear that, and I was like, wow, that actually, yes, it made a big difference.
So
I
you
actually
got it. You
found
got the Phantom Center exactly how you where you'd expected it.
I got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Installing Sonarworks has kind of moved the phantom center a little bit, or
Uh-huh.
it has it's changed it
Yeah.
somehow. Maybe it's playing with the phase or something. It sounds better in a wider area, but I'm missing that focal point that I did have. So I'm going to have to change something. I don't know what it is.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. It's definitely worth messing with that. I mean, I'm not sure if Sonarworks does any kind of phase compensation at this point, but even just the fact that it can delay the speakers relative to each other, so
Yes.
it can work with the delay, and obviously
Yeah.
it can EQ the speakers separately.
Yep.
Yeah, so both of those will have an impact on the stereo image and the phantom center. And obviously, ideally, what you want is it to become even clearer, even more precise.
Yes.
But sometimes it kind of overbakes things a little bit. It's definitely worth kind of tweaking that a little bit.
Absolutely. There's a like an amount
Exactly.
slider. I need
Yeah.
to have a look at that. The other thing was when I did my room measurements, I used
Hmm.
REW with a reference mic that didn't have a calibration file.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had the mic pointed upwards when I did these measurements. But when you do it with Sonarworks, you don't. You point it horizontally.
Mhm. Is that the same microphone? As in,
The
does it
same
say that?
microphone it
It
was.
says that for the same microphone?
No. So this is one of the things. There was a trial version of Sonarworks that I got,
Hmm.
which I used my previous microphone with. It didn't have a calibration file. So the REW measurements were done with the microphone vertical and the
Hmm.
Sonarworks ones horizontal, but
Hmm.
without changing any of the calibration file. So one of them may be off axis, one of the measurements,
I mean,
compared
this
with the
is
other one. I don't know.
yeah. I mean,
So
this is
so
yeah.
I've
Go ahead.
invested in the full version of Sonarworks, and they've sent me a calibrated mic to use with that. I haven't used it yet.
Well, long story short, it's not that big of a deal. There are different types of microphone that are meant to be used either vertically or horizontally, depending on how they are constructed. And like you can kind of, it basically affects how the high end tails off. Yeah. And the important thing, really, for me at least, is that you're consistent with this stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like the final balance in this case of the high end, for example, on any system, I would do by ear because it's a taste thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So where exactly that line ends up in the measurements to me doesn't matter all that much as long as I'm seeing that there aren't any kind of big errors there, mistakes there, or any
Indeed.
problems
Yeah.
showing
Yeah.
up. But the exact kind of taper that doesn't really matter all that much to me because I'm going to tweak that by ear anyway because it's a taste thing.
Yes.
But so it's not that big of a deal.
But
and I wouldn't worry
even
about it too much.
Sonarworks allows you to do some tweaking on that
It
respect.
does,
So,
and I would recommend that. I
yep.
just wanted to come back quickly to the what you mentioned, the experience of kind of listening to the speakers for the first time, and you was mentioning that you realize, or it sounded like they weren't as, or there was less space than before. Because the funny thing is, obviously, is that you took the REW measurements, and it's clear that there definitely isn't less space. If anything, it's
No,
more even and it's in
yeah,
line with kind of what you'd expect, right? So
yeah,
I think this is a great example for people watching to realize how much we are conditioned, preconditioned to expect something when we're coming from an empty room, an untreated room, and then we put the treatment in, and you might listen to something and think this is completely wrong, when in fact it's actually righter.
yes,
Yeah. But because
yeah,
we were expecting something else, because we'd listened to it like that for a substantial amount of time, And
Indeed.
it can feel really it can be really confusing, or like confusing basically. Yeah? But I think this is just something to always keep in mind when you're changing things about your room, both in terms, well, no matter what type of changes you make, be they kind of just putting in treatment or changing your speakers, repositioning your speakers. It's worth spending some time with it to learn what actually changed, instead of unless it's glaringly obvious. In some cases it might be, but this sort of thing happens all the time. One other thing that people tell me a lot is how the high end changed. Maybe, I don't know if you noticed, Richie, if you noticed anything changing about the high end, how it feels, how it sounds.
I thought it sounded a bit more tinny.
Tinny. Interesting.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. On that, I did worry that I hadn't managed to get the slats in my diffuser on point because of the width of available wood and the width of the box didn't match up. I ended up with 13 slats.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, so I saw one response that you did to another
The
viewer,
question somewhere. Mm-hmm.
yeah, that said really, as long as there's 50% of the thing covered,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be precise, is
Yeah.
basically. So I got I I used 4 different MLS patterns as I went through the planning of this thing,
Okay. Yeah.
and in the end up I had to choose one that had a slat on each side of the box, on
Mm-hmm.
each side of the front, because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want a gap at one side.
Mm-hmm.
It was an aesthetic thing, but also it made the box more rigid as well.
It does. It helps.
There were
Yeah.
there were
Mm-hmm.
benefits for doing that. So
Yeah.
that's eventually what I came up against. But I don't know whether the MLS is working or not, because I don't know what those would sound like without a diffuser on. If you know what I
It's
mean. I did notice
yeah.
from my measurement that there's a comb filter above 2K, and I didn't know whether that would be the monitor doing the monitor screens doing that or the desk or something. That wasn't in the original recording on the untreated room. So it must
Yes.
be something to do with either the furniture or the treatment that's done that. But it's not
That's
noticeable.
yeah. Quick answer, easy answer. That's the desk. Yeah. You can
Right.
very directly see that in the measurements, and that's very typical. Um, it's just something that we, especially in a room like yours, where you don't have an option to adjust the speaker positioning relative to the desk in order to kind of reduce the impact that the desk reflection has. That's just something you kind of have to live with. But as you said, it's not that noticeable. Yeah, that's why
It's
I
it's
tell people don't worry about it. It's just
it,
like
it it's not that noticeable, and if it's there all the time, you will
yeah,
adjust to it.
that's
It's
exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I see people go, oh, I have to get rid of the desk reflection, and so I've had to do this and put that up there. Did I even see? Was it Graham?
For
He
Music
had a
City Acoustics,
yeah, he got a desk that's made of slats.
yes,
Yeah, which I thought was a bit extreme, but
yeah,
if you're all about the acoustics, then that makes sense. But I was about the music rather than the acoustics of the thing. I just needed it to sound right.
yeah, yeah,
To
yeah.
not be unworkable
That's right.
was my goal, and I've achieved
Yeah.
that. And that's hats off to you and the guys. That's brilliant.
Well, I appreciate that, and I mean you did a great job. I'm obviously showing pictures here as well as we talk, and the room looks great. You put a lot of effort in. You put in the work, and you get the result. I mean, it's pretty straightforward in that sense, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean there were some difficulties. Like
Tell me.
I ordered the lengths of wood in 2.4 meters,
Okay.
and they actually came in 4.8.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah,
How
no,
did they deliver those? Did they show
I
up with
got
a big
this.
truck?
Yeah, so I got the same length of wood, only
Yeah.
all in one bit. So I did get four 1.2 meters, but
Okay.
all in one. On so the only place I could put these things, it was raining.
Oh.
It's a good job I've got a garage. I
Yeah.
managed to just about get them in the. I mean, where have you got in your house that's 5 meters long?
If you're lucky in your living room, right? But then,
If you're lucky, yeah. So I was like, oh well. So they had to go in the garage. They couldn't go flat because I've got other stuff in there.
mhm.
So they warped a little bit, which caused caused me some aggro when I was putting the boxes together because they were warped.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do anything about that. But it did mean that I had to quickly cut
I was
in
just
order
going to
to
say,
try and get them as flat as possible.
not have them
But
standing
that
too
took
too long.
2 or 3 days in damp weather, and it wasn't good. And the lesson I learned from that was that you can't get you can't get two 1.2 meter lengths of wood from a 2.4 meter length of wood. It doesn't work.
Well, you're gonna miss. It's gonna be like you gotta account for the wood that you cut off.
The blade.
Right? The blade,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's gonna be like a millimeter or two missing. Yeah.
That's it. And plus, if you order planed PSE, it's called. Yeah.
Okay.
Plain straight edge wood,
Okay.
which is the nice looking pine. If you order a 200 millimeter wide piece of wood, it will come at 194 because the 200 millimeters is before they've planed it. And if you want a 100 millimeter width piece of wood, it will come at 94. So they take 6 millimeters off, whether it's
That's a
200
lot, to be honest. That's a lot.
It is. So none of the boxes are the size that I'd planned them to be, but it works.
I mean, and I was just going to say, considering they look fantastic, right? Again, I mean, it looks really, really proper. It looks really clean.
From a distance, they look great, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's how it is. I mean, you should look at mine, you know?
One thing I did think a lot about was safety. I've got the corner panel near the patio door.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, if I bump into that, the top one is liable to topple over because even though there's a lot of weight there, there's a high gravity. So I installed some chains on the top one of each of the corner ones to
just to stabilize them. Yeah,
just
them
to
from toppling.
link it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I put some buckle catches between the top one and the bottom one. So they're essentially fixed as one unit. And that stops them wobbling in the middle as well.
Yeah.
That was a good call because I can wobble it now and it's not going anywhere. It's great.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing was the ceiling ones. Having completed one and weighed it, it was 15 kilograms. And I do not want this thing ending up on my head, you know?
Nope, definitely not.
So there were real sort of anxiety about the hooks. Will the hook stay in the wood in the absorber panel? Will the hook stay in the ceiling, in the batten? What about the chain in between them? None of these things in the hardware store had any ratings of what weight they could hold. Was I going to get big hooks, little hooks? I went for medium ones in the end. If anybody wants to know which ones I've got, then feel free to get in touch somehow.
To get in touch, yeah.
Yeah,
but I mean,
because these are panicky. These are things that you panic about. You know.
Yeah, sure.
I was like flipping heck. How am I going to get them up there on my own? I did have a little trick for installing the battens in the ceiling.
Okay.
Which I have. It's like an extendable telescopic plasterboard holder.
It's with the thing that looks like this, and you can like winch it up, and you put the panel on top. Is that right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was only lightweight, so it was only good. It was good for holding the batten in the on the ceiling.
Okay.
Whilst I screwed it in place.
Okay.
It would not hold a 15 kilo on its own because there's only one end to it, so it'd be wobbling about anyway. But and I got some ratchet straps to ratchet up the ceiling ones. They were absolutely invaluable. Yeah,
interesting.
So little bits of tools to help you do these things.
Yeah.
If you've got no friends, this is what you need to do.
Well, I was just going to ask if you did it on your own. And I mean, I think one of the most valuable things to have is as a buddy to work with. But sometimes you just got to do it on your own, and it's possible. You just got to kind of find a way. I tend to kind of just hang them on one end.
Yes.
And then pivot them up. That's
what I did. Yeah.
Did you talking about the hooks and the chains? What did you end up finding? Right. I mean, I expect that it didn't end up being an issue at all. But like, what did you find?
It didn't end up being an issue. No.
It's although one of the things you think about, but in the end, it's
I mean, it hasn't fallen down yet, but there's time for that.
I haven't had a single one fall down ever. So
well, the way that I worked out whether it was going to be good or not was I had the box on the floor and installed the hooks and lifted it with the hooks, and that proved to me that it would work.
And just see how much play there is, if you feel any kind of danger of these things ripping out. But in the end, they hold a lot of weight. And if you have all four corners hooked up,
all four corners, so so I was thinking, well, it's only going to be 3 kilograms per corner that it's holding.
Yeah.
The other thing was buying the chain in lengths. You have to buy the chain in a length of, well, I don't know, 2 meters or something. You only want little. I mean, some of the chains for the diagonal ones, for the soffit ones, some of those chains are only 3 links long.
Yeah.
So you need a Dremel or something to chop
because you got a really thick one. Interesting. Okay. I always ended up buying one that was just thin enough so I could actually cut it with a like heavy pair of pliers. But
I probably could have done with these, but I Dremeled it because it looks impressive. There's sparks going everywhere.
Well, Richie, moving on to today again. I mean, you've been in this room or working in the room, gaining experience for, you said, since April, basically a few months now. So for you, it's been definitely a journey of getting used to the room, learning improving your mixing skill. Can you tell me a bit about that? Like, what are some of the things that you've learned since, both about the room, but more importantly, just skills that you've developed, things where you finally kind of, what were the next things that you leveled up in, let's say, when it comes to your mixing ability? What have you been working on?
Well, it's given me the room, no pun intended. It's given me the room to actually do some mixing. I wasn't mixing anybody else's stuff. It's given me the confidence to sign up to a couple of courses which have got mixing challenges in there. You're mixing other people's things. You're not emotionally invested really in the song that you're mixing. I'm learning about the workflow tweaks I can do with my DAW. It's just provided the opportunity to do these things that I wouldn't have done if the room hadn't been here. I don't know whether people who were listening to my mixes would say that they're getting better because there was nothing really before to compare them to. But I listened to some of the stuff that I recorded myself earlier, and it's dreadful. Absolutely awful.
Yeah. Can you give me some examples, maybe some things that you particularly improved in particular, maybe like reverbs, like spaces, or leveling, EQing. Can you tell me a bit about like your experience, what has changed on some of these specific parts of the process?
Yes, I did a mix of a rock song the other day. Well, over a few. Well, I kept tweaking the vocal to make it sit, but I found that when I finally said, right, enough is enough, and I went to listen to it on the other systems in the house, and it was fine. Whereas beforehand, I would be backwards and forwards saying this is too low, that's too high. And also, as the mix changes between a verse and a chorus or an intro, I've learned how to deal with that. It's like do for instance, a chorus, and then tweak the levels around that with automation. Because if you're listening to something, well, the bass is too loud, and you come back and you turn it down, when it gets to the bit where it was just right, it's too quiet. So you're forever going backwards and forwards. So it's provided a space where I can learn this stuff about how you do that, and it's definitely progressing well. I would say. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Sweet, Richie. Well, I think maybe we'll leave it at that for now. Thanks so much for sharing all this with us. I think it's really amazing to hear about your journey going through this and the results that you got. Obviously, for anybody watching this who kind of wants to follow along, I've got a free guide that you can follow, my home studio treatment framework, which basically lists the main 5 steps that I teach in order to take a room from untreated to fully treated in the right order, so that you're not turning in circles, you're not redoing things that you should have done right at the start. And this is basically the same process that Richie followed. So if you want to check that out, if you want to follow along with what Richie did and what I teach, make sure you download that. It's for free at the link in the description. But yeah, Richie, any final words that you would like to share before we wrap up?
If you're thinking of doing this, be prepared for loss of the room whilst you're doing it. You're going to need a space if you're cutting the wood yourself, you're going to need a space where that's not going to be a problem. I had a covered area outside, which looked like a snowstorm had hit it after I'd been cutting. I did have to rebuild 4 of the boxes because I cut the wood incorrectly.
Ah, damn. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, not the wrong lengths, but it turned out I couldn't cut vertically very well.
Okay.
So I could cut on the mark that I'd made across the width of a piece of wood.
Right.
But the depth of the wood, I would go off.
Uh-huh.
So where the wood joined together, these ends, this end and that end, were not 90. They weren't 90 degrees.
Okay.
So the box ended up as a rhomboid.
Right.
Yeah. So I invested in a sliding miter saw, which solved the problem.
Okay.
I should have done that at the beginning. I thought, well, I tried a hand electric saw. I tried a hand saw. I tried to cobble together a miter box that would fit in an 8-inch piece of wood, but width-wise, that didn't work. So you do need to invest in some tools if you don't have if you don't have them. It's knowing what tools you're going to need, though, and I think sometimes you have to experiment with a piece of wood before you find out that you're rubbish at doing it, and you need a tool that will help you do it.
I mean, I'm sorry to hear that on one end, but also it's why I recommend, and maybe you did that, to build a kind of a test box, a test panel at the beginning from start to finish. So you kind of go through all this step once and make sure you understand how everything fits together. Well, same with the kind of the fabric and stuff, all this stuff, because there are little tweaks here and there.
Yeah, I did a test box, which was fine.
Okay.
So it was further down the process that I had this problem. The other thing is, if you build the frames first, you need somewhere to store them. If they're in your studio room while you're trying to put things in place, you've got, I don't know, 20 boxes. There's no room for them. You need somewhere to put them. So they will be scattered around your house. They'll be in the kitchen, in the lounge. If you've got pets and children or a partner, this could become an issue. So just have a think about that.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's important to understand that you are, in a way, changing the room completely, right? This isn't like you are making, or introducing a large change to the geometry of the space, and it comes with a certain amount of work and time involved, right? It's not terribly hard, but it is. Quantity-wise, it can be quite a lot.
Yes, I mean, even before you start, you've got to clear out the room.
Yeah.
Now my room had a desk in it, all kinds of computer equipment, and cupboards and filing cabinets, and a sofa.
Yeah.
So and a carpet. All that stuff had to go somewhere before I could even start thinking about putting or decoration. So the decoration and laying the floor had to happen before I could do anything. And that was a big thing for me, because I thought, well, maybe I'm doing this and the measurements will show that I shouldn't have bothered.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and it doesn't work. That's the fear, right? It's like you do all this. Well, maybe did it work? Was it worth it?
Absolutely. Absolutely superb. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear
I'm over the moon about this room. And I would recommend it as even as a learning opportunity of what potentially not to do. You will come out of it with techniques that you might use in other areas as well.
Yeah. All right, Richie. Again, all the best. For the future, and in your room many hours of fun and learning. And till next time. Bye bye.
Thank you, mate.